What can be said about a town that is 100 years old?
The Nanyuki by then was made up of shacks.
But from the shacks has arisen an area filled with beauty, wonder and serenity, unrivaled in East Africa.
So welcome to our 3-bedroom all-en-suite bungalow.
So, and Olpejeta has 2 subspecies of white rhinos. We have the northern white rhinos and the southern white rhinos.
We take a trip down memory lane.
If you wanted to go fishing, you applied for a license, you would pay 1 shilling for the license for 1 year.
And explore why many people are choosing this area as their preferred tourist destination.
It's not densely populated, so many Nairobians, many people from Kisii, from Nakuru, from Nairobi, from Kiambu, like to come.
Nanyuki is a pretty top destination, considering the fact that they have the numerous conservancies.
This week's episode of Area Code takes you to a place commonly known simply by the moniker Mwisho wa Reli. If Nanyuki was to be considered a person, she would be 101 years old today. She would have aged well, like fine wine. But on the streets of this historic town, perception is indeed reality. Nanyuki was gazetted as a township on the 24th of November 1920 under the East Africa Township Ordinance of 1903 by then Governor of the Colony of Kenya and East Africa Protectorate, Sir Edward Northey. That gazettement was, however, long overdue. The area had for years been a hideout for the white settlers in the colony who acquired large tracts of land, mostly used for game hunting and horse breeding. Before becoming a township, Nanyuki was generally referred to as North Nyeri, forming part of the vast Laikipia Plateau, which stretches from the slopes of the snow-capped Mount Kenya to the rim of the Great Rift Valley to the south. During the pre-colonial era, the larger Laikipia Plateau, including Nanyuki, was land often inhabited by the Maasai, who grazed their cattle there while migrating to the south towards Tanganyika in search of pasture and water streams. It is during that era that the Ma community inadvertently named the area Nanyuki, derived from the Maasai word Enkare Nanyukie, which means the river of blood.
Nanyuki is known as a red river or red water. So when it used to rain on the mountains, the soil, when it gets down to the river, because of the heavy, rain was very heavy. So the water was being turned into red by the soil. So when it flows, when it's raining heavily, probably they used to see red water before it settles down.
But as soon as the first white settlers began exploring Nanyuki, manipulation crept in. It is believed that on the 10th of August 1904, an agreement was signed between the Maasai chiefs led by Laibon Lenana and Sir Stewart of the British government to hand over large parcels of land to the visiting whites. Although this agreement would eventually unsuccessfully be disputed by the Maasai in court, many believe Laibon was either coerced or intimidated into signing the treaty. In 1919, the acquired land would eventually be used by the British as part of a then new program called the Soldier Settlement Scheme. The scheme was introduced as part of efforts to honor and reward British soldiers who survived World War I by offering them large parcels of land on the highlands of Kenya. The largest chunk of land to be issued out would come from Laikipia, where 950,000 acres were set aside for the program.
Those farms were all owned by Europeans. A European could own 10,000 acres, 5,000 acres. We were surrounded, we never saw anybody. And the workers were very few. who are being kept in their farms, and they used to come here twice a week for the market to buy their own whatever they wanted. And they were being taken to an old market, released, escorted, buy what they are buying, come and load off their goods, and then back to the farm.
David Mwangi is a descendant of one of the African families who used to work at a farm owned by British settlers. He recalls of a time in Nanyuki where racism was high and freedom for the African was low.
It was a bit difficult because our parents were squatters. And you know the life of a squatter is difficult. You don't own anything. You are working only for 30 shillings per month. That's the salary of your father.
But the tide for Nanyuki would change when in 1930 the meter gauge railway line reached the town. The subsidiary line snaked its way through the plains heading to northern Kenya. But something happened in November of 1930. Construction abruptly stopped. The railway line never proceeded north. It's a phenomenon that has earned Nanyuki the nickname Mwisho wa Reli, signifying the end of the construction of the railway line. There are many theories to suggest the genesis of the moniker Mwisho wa Reli, which Nanyuki is well known for. Now, one of the theories suggests that the planners and the engineers constructing the railway line, once reaching Nanyuki, were enticed by the women here and inadvertently lost the maps that they needed to proceed with the construction to Meru and later on Isiolo. The second theory suggests that this branch of the railway line had been constructed to supply weaponry to the British soldiers battling in the war in Abyssinia, commonly known as Ethiopia now. They were battling the Italians, and in that war, it is said that 2 days after the Italians ceded ground, the powers that be saw no reason to continue with the construction of this railway line that was supposed to go to the northwestern part of Kenya to supply weaponry. Hence the reason why the train railway line ended here. However, there's a third reason as to why this place is commonly known as Mwisho wa Reli.
The Kenya government by then had a loan of £5.5 million. That is the money used by the British government to construct the railway from Mombasa to Kisumu, and the other branches. So the railway had to pay back the loan. By then it was a lot of money, £5.5 million. So the British government had to make sure that where the railway goes, it is going to pay back. Nanyuki, gawa mashamba, patia wale wazungu, walime, walipe nini? Railway. So hii ya hapa ilikuwa ati ni ya kubeba nini? Ng'ombe, nguruwe, maziwa, na kingine naita creamery. And they built creameries, KCC, today's KCC. By then it was known as creamery.
Part of the truth, of course, is that in the old days, the Kenya Railways itself and her predecessor, East African Railways and Habas, had a road service between here and Meru town. So there is a railway depot in Meru town, but the train itself did not get to Meru town. It would get to Nanyuki. Goods destined for Meru town would be put on trucks by the railway itself and then take those goods to their depot in Nanyuki.
But for whatever reason that construction of the railway line never proceeded, its presence in Nanyuki made a difference. It led to the influx of many people from neighboring Nyeri and Isiolo areas.
There were some people who were saying that it had to be extended beyond here to go to Isiolo. But it could not be extended to Isiolo. Isiolo is desert. It cannot pay anything. And by then it was, the people were scattered inside Manyata na nini. They could not pay anything. So the Mzungu could not extend the rail from here By then it was known as Northern Frontier District. So it ended here.
In 2020, the railway, which had been dormant for over a decade, was revived by the government with hopes to link it to the ongoing Lapset project. But the construction of the line to Nanyuki did not only bring with it more European settlement to the area, it led to the rise of resistance from the natives who by this time were awakening to the injustice of having much of their land taken away from them.
Kuja pande hii walikuja wakuje waende machamba haya ya wazungu, waibe ng'ombe, wakate miguu, tupane chize mzungu, ng'ombe zake zilikuwa zikikatwa pande hii. Ili akiamuka asubuhi akute ng'ombe zake zote zimekatwa miguu ya nyuma. Afanye nini? Si atoke aende Ulaya. That is the meaning of Mau Mau. Mzungu aende Ulaya, Mwafrika apate uhuru. That is Mau Mau.
The resistance was mostly led from here, Majengo informal settlement area in Nanyuki, where a majority of Africans resided after moving to the town. It would later be classified as a militarized zone by the colonial government in 1952 after a state of emergency was declared in the country. Best friends Yusuf Kaka and David Mwangi, who are now both in their 70s, recall living in Nanyuki during those days.
Where you could live was only a place called Majengo, which was surrounded by like a jeshi, like an army camp with posts and wires, and only one gate. One where the big gate opens, vehicles go in. A small gate, you inspected, you go in. And in one plot, which is now currently residing about 20, 30 people, by then it was only probably 6, 7 people in a plot. So people were very few. And any new person who is found to have come to Nanyuki was caught and taken to next to the prison. There was a place where there was a tent where people were being kept there, held overnight, 2 to 3 days. Wakimaliza, they were being wanasafirishwa, wanapelekwa where they came from.
It's a dark and checkered past for an area that has truly transformed over the years. We find out how when we come back from the break.
This is surely going to be the next frontier in housing in Nanyuki.
So Andolpejeta has 2 subspecies of white rhinos. We have the northern white rhinos and the southern white rhinos.
Months after completing 2 terms as America's 26th head of state, Theodore Roosevelt would make his way to Kenya for an expedition which would ultimately see more than 3,000 animals hunted down and preserved at various American museums. The ex-president arrived in Kenya through the port of Mombasa in 1909 and would spend nearly 10 months traveling the country, hunting game and exploring Africa's rich beauty. His famous safari, which was documented by the Smithsonian Institute, saw Roosevelt's itinerary pass through Nanyuki, where he traveled to using the Lunatic Express. But perhaps Nanyuki's main claim to fame in the early 1900s is the military presence that descended on the small town. The British Army, battling Italians on the northeastern side towards Somalia during World War I, set their base here.
We were surrounded by the army, and before then there was, we knew there were Italians who were prisoners of war. In fact, they were being held in Nanyuki. So Nanyuki was an army area.
The first to arrive was the Royal Air Force, who acquired a local airstrip to land their fighter planes.
The British could not be able to deter or to fight the Italians when they are at E3 in Nairobi. So they had to look for a place to land their Royal Air Force. Hapa.
And over the years, Nanyuki has been known to host the region's most militarized zone.
British Army trains here, but you'll also find other nationalities, Americans, Europeans, and so on.
During the First and Second World Wars, the King's African Rifles also had a garrison in Nanyuki that was used as a training center. To this day, the presence of British military personnel can be seen and felt in the town. But military presence aside, it takes you just about 25 minutes to get to see the true beauty that this area indeed has to offer. I'm about to take a game drive at the Olpejeta Conservancy, one of the many natural conservancies in Nanyuki that has been a hotbed for tourist attraction in the region.
Fine, thank you. I'm good. Yeah.
Jimmy, our guide for the day, has been working here for the last decade.
Ones that we are watching now, that is what we call a bachelor herd, which consists of old bulls that have been chased away from the herd by the young boys.
Young tucks have taken over.
Yes.
The 90,000-acre conservancy has been home to more than 50 different species of wildlife. Its history dates back more than 70 years when it was used as a cattle ranch and an area for hunting game for fun.
Formerly it was owned by Lord Delamere, the one who owns a big farm in Naivasha area.
It was owned by various different people, including a guy called Adnan Khashoggi, who was at the time one of the richest people in the world. He was an arms dealer, and he owned this ranch and built the Olpejeta Ranch House, the famous Olpejeta Ranch House. It was then owned by Lonra Africa for a period of time, and during that period it started to convert, the land use system here started to be converted from pure cattle to cattle across about 70% of the area.
The land was eventually bought out from Lonro Africa in 2005 and turned into the conservancy that it is today. Nanyuki's Olpejeta Conservancy is perhaps best known for hosting some of the most endangered species of wildlife in the world.
So, and Olpejeta has two subspecies of white rhinos. We have the northern white rhinos and the southern white rhinos.
The two northern white rhinos, Fatu and Najin, who have found a dwelling place here, are female. The last male northern white rhino, the world-famous Sudan, died on the 19th of March 2018 due to old age.
It's a place that you don't see the same thing every day.
Jimmy, who had been Sudan's caregiver for the amount of time he had been at the conservancy, admits that the death had an impact on him and his work.
Sudan came here in 2009, and I was one of the caregivers of Sudan back then. So I got to know Sudan since he arrived, and I worked with him for about 5 years. So the caregivers, including me, we had such a very huge attachment with these animals. So you get to live with them, and they become very close to you.
There are about 160 registered conservancies in Kenya. 9 of them are in Nanyuki, making the area attractive to both local and foreign tourists. The Olpejeta Conservancy saw 115,000 tourists visit in 2019, but after the pandemic hit in 2020, slightly less than 45,000 people came to see the wildlife.
My name is Daniel Irongo.
It's such conservancies that give players in the hospitality industry like Daniel Irungu impetus to keep their establishments open.
So welcome to our 3-bedroom all-en-suite bungalow with very spacious lounge space, natural adequate lighting, comfortable sitting space, and a very simple interior design.
He has been investing in holiday homes, hoping to tap into the growing tourist market consisting of people who come to experience Nanyuki's scenic views, like the snow-capped Mount Kenya, whose breathtaking view stands out as a landmark in the otherwise nonchalant town. Let me ask, why Nanyuki? Why this place?
Nanyuki is a very interesting place because it is only in Nanyuki where you have now the largest group of wild roaming, free roaming wildlife. Within Nanyuki, you're able to spot all the big five. Within Nanyuki, you also have very good sites. For example, you can go mountain climbing.
He has overseen the development of Swara Ranch, comprising of 34 bungalows. It's an emerging real estate development deep in the heart of Laikipia Plains, which was constructed in 2019. It's the kind of accommodation investors say tourists are yearning for in Nanyuki, and the hotel industry here does not want to be left behind. The Mayan Villas in Nanyuki has been competing to position itself as the best tourist accommodation center. These 6 villas act as a centerpiece for accommodation in a resort where serenity is the focal point for attraction, the other being the many conservancies in the area.
The conservancy has really played a part in attracting clientele to this region, Laikipia to be specifically, both internationally and locally.
The ambience is good. The accommodation setting is pretty lovely. I mean, we appreciate their setup where we have a villa and we have the villa to ourselves with our team.
And as new real estate developments hope to tap into the tourism market, the town itself remains historic as one of the few in the world where the equator passes through. The 40,000-kilometer long imaginary line divides the Earth into the northern and southern hemisphere, making Nanyuki among the very few places on Earth and just the 3rd town in Kenya after Maseno and Timboroa to have the line pass through it. For a place filled with history and beauty, Nanyuki's 100-year existence hopes to extend well into the next century, earning admiration from both local residents and incoming tourists every step of the way.
The way I look at it, Nanyuki is growing at a speedy rate, and I think one of the factors is the fact that Nanyuki is barely 200 kilometers from Nairobi. That makes it pretty convenient, and also the fact that the government is currently working on expanding the roads to Nanyuki. I have a feel that Nanyuki in the next, say, 5 years will grow at a tremendous rate.